Okay, well, let's kick off our panel on strengthening defense technology partnerships. It's a real privilege to introduce this auspicious panel. Most of them are friends of mine, but well known to all of us here, but I'll give them a quick introduction anyways. I'll begin with Major General Josh Rudd, who's just finishing up his tour as the Chief of Staff of Indo-Pacific Command. And that's, we're trying to put the Indo and the Indo-Pacific Command with events like this, right? But General Rudd is awaiting confirmation. He's been nominated to be the Deputy Commander of the Indo-Pacific Command, which is an extraordinarily important role. And we'll hope that you sail through the Senate and you stay back on the team. Josh, thank you for being here. Real special personal privilege to introduce DASD Lori Abel, who is the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for South and Southeast Asia, which is a great job. I had the privilege of serving that capacity with Lori and the team, and she taught me so much about how everything worked in the Pentagon, and she's a real, true policy professional, and we're just lucky to have her on the team. We have Vivek Law, a CEO of General Atomics Global Corporation. He's been kind of a rock star in recent months. You've seen him with, all the senior leaders, to include from the U.S. and India, but his company is doing extraordinary work, and he's a great example of what's possible in the relationship. Let's see, we have Arun Ramachandani, the Executive Vice President of Larsen Toubro, which is an Indian defense company most of you have heard about, and really doing some really interesting work with the United States, especially with repairs on U.S. Navy ships. Then Amit Satyaja, thank you so much for representing the Ministry of Defense here with India, and thank you for all you're doing. We'll try to not ask you to speak for India and take care of all the questions, but thank you for being here and representing the Ministry of Defense. So I thought we might do, this is going to be a little more informal than the previous fireside discussion. We'll give each panelist a chance to make any opening remarks. I've got some questions teed up, but then we'll hopefully have a good substantive discussion as we try to identify those challenges and opportunities for defense technology partnership. But General Rudd, let's go with the flashbang first, and appreciate you being here.
Hey, thanks, Joe, and really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this event. Humbled, honored, as noted, many distinguished and strategic thinkers in this crowd. So, and I must start with a quick apology to my other military colleagues in the crowd. At least two of you, they got the right memo on the uniform, my appearance. I sincerely apologize. This is not a clever attempt to blend in with the crowd at Stanford and Silicon Valley. This is simply an unfortunate side effect of a bag not keeping pace with me on the flight. So, but despite minor challenges like that, we can overcome that. I think what I would just offer by way of introduction from U.S. Indo-PACOM, and on behalf of Admiral Paparo, again, very privileged to be here. The challenges that we face are much greater than being in the wrong uniform or maybe in the wrong attire. As you all well know, challenges that we face militarily and from a strategic and a security perspective far outweigh that. Let's just look at what's going on in the world right now. Not only in the Indo-Pacific region, and I'll come back to that obviously as we focus on that day in and day out, but we have a raging war in Europe, as evidenced by Russia's activities in Ukraine, and we have continuing conflict in the Middle East. But as we bring it back a little bit closer to Indo-Pacific home, we have an unparalleled modernization by the PRC in terms of their military capacity, unseen since the likes of World War II. And it's obviously very concerning to us, especially when you couple it with their activity, their continued pressure in and around Taiwan, their activity that challenges the rules-based international order in the South China Sea, that directly impacts a treated ally of ours, the Philippines. I think you can just take instances like that and couple it with DPRK's continued aspirations to develop their missile capability and advance a nuclear program. And you can start to see where this is an incredibly complex, but also incredibly consequential times that we face right now. And so as Indo-Pacific Command looks at it every day, and as we look at this world of complexity, simultaneity, and increasingly challenges, we also see opportunity. And we know that those opportunities will be realized and seized through partnership. It's partnership within the U.S. defense complex. One of the hosts of this, the Defense Innovation Unit, DIU, certainly a critical partner as we look at what are the capabilities that we need to procure and scale and integrate into our joint force, but then the opportunity that comes with partnerships. Partnerships through allies and partners in the region. And as mentioned by many of the opening speakers, this is absolutely a strategic partnership, the partnership with India. And we're privileged to be a part of it. We're excited about the direction that it's going. And we are clear-eyed and we are sober about the complexity, the challenges that we face. But we're absolutely committed at U.S. Indo-PACOM to delivering deterrence, assurance, a trusting relationship with India and those other nations in the region that face the complexity and the threats from those in the region that would seek to upend the rules-based international order. So again, you heard many of the opening speakers talk about shared values and trust, and that's really where our decisive advantage is, and that's where the opportunity lies right here. So Joe, thanks for the opportunity to be here and be a part of this awesome forum.
Thank you, General Rudd. Dasdi Abel, it's wonderful to see you.
Thanks very much, Joe. Thanks for having us, and thank you to Stanford and the U.S.-India Strategic Partnership Forum for organizing this summit, which is so important to the overall efforts here, because this is really, we think, in the Defense Department, a transformative moment in the U.S.-India partnership. Under the leadership of President Biden and Prime Minister Modi, we are actively expanding U.S.-India cooperation on vital technologies and strengthening defense industrial cooperation. And these initiatives under INDUS epitomize the work and complement other ongoing efforts, including those under the U.S.-India Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technologies, to build upon this transformative moment in our nation's partnership. Last June, Defense Secretary Austin and Defense Minister Singh launched the roadmap for U.S.-India defense industrial cooperation to support India's military modernization objectives, facilitate technology sharing, and promote supply chain resilience. The roadmap calls on both sides to facilitate dialogues like this summit and to do the hard work of evaluating our respective policies and authorities to support enhanced defense cooperation. While that includes ambitious projects underway to co-produce armored combat vehicles, anti-tank guided munitions, and more, INDUS casts a wider net to expand technology collaboration. We seek to streamline processes on both sides to help all companies, including smaller companies and startups. We want to move faster, we must. This is an ideal venue to achieve a better collective understanding of pain points and opportunities in our systems as we continue to work to address them. And today and tomorrow, I look forward to hearing more from all of you on what you'd like the government to be doing here. INDUS advances the Secretary's goal and the White House goal of driving closer collaboration between the U.S. and defense ecosystems. From the time DoD and the Indian Ministry of Defense launched INDUS last June, we have collaborated to enable more partnerships between U.S. and Indian innovators, investors, and researchers. These partnerships are fundamental to generating critical defense technologies for U.S. and Indian militaries, as General Rudd just discussed, and ultimately maintaining our shared vision for a free and open Indo-Pacific. In just 15 months since the launch, INDUS has already made significant strides toward facilitating partnerships and producing new opportunities to accelerate defense technology innovation. The Defense Innovation Unit and India's IDEX have built an incredibly productive partnership. Together, they have launched and completed joint challenges and identified 10 companies with commercial solutions for maritime surveillance and undersea communications. They've also recorded and published multiple sessions of INDUS education series that connects companies with expert insights on private capital, export controls, and supply chain security. This February, we saw U.S. and Indian universities and companies also come together to launch the INDUS Works Testing Consortium. This private sector-led consortium has expanded access to testing facilities for U.S. and Indian defense technology companies. These joint challenges, the education series, and the INDUS Works Consortium are 3 very promising efforts under INDUS-X that will continue to expand and evolve. Beyond these projects, we've seen continued progress in other areas, as universities convene for INDUS-X workshops to discuss best practices for technology transfer and transition. And those workshops have scoped opportunities for our top academic institutions like this one to partner to develop technology in emerging domains, such as space. And I would be remiss not to mention the essential role of investors under INDUS-X. Investors convened last November in New Delhi to discuss INDUS-X initiatives and ways to drive more capital toward companies that produce critical defense technologies. So we want to see partnerships like this flourish between investors, not just in India or the United States, but between our country's investors as well. Concerted investment in dual use and defense technologies will help narrow the valley of death for innovators across US and India. In the next year, INDUS-X will focus on driving more engagement with investors to ensure we're aligning our priorities. We'll redouble our efforts to ensure that this partnership remains in hyperdrive.
Thank you. Thank you, Lori. Very sweeping and comprehensive. Full disclosure, I did not ask our colleagues from the private sector to come up with detailed prepared remarks, and they don't have the same kind of staffing, but Vivek, I want to give you the chance to provide some opening comments as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Again, thank you, Mukesh and Gaurav from USISPF for hosting us here, and of course the Hoover Institution and here at Stanford. Great to see so many startup companies and folks that are going to be exhibiting today. It's really encouraging, I think, from a corporate standpoint to see the startup community in both nations come together under this platform. INDUS-X provides great impetus. There has been tremendous progress, and as Condi Rice said, you know, the human capital element of this is so critical. Because without the people involved, we wouldn't have gotten here, and the momentum is very great. I firmly believe there are 6 stakeholder buckets that need to come together for progress in any initiative. And if you leave out a couple, then you will not have an optimum solution in terms of speed, et cetera, which also John Chambers mentioned. And so the first bucket is the political spectrum on both sides, and there is great convergence, bipartisan support on both sides to make this happen. The second bucket would be the bureaucracy and the Ministry of Defense and the Pentagon and everyone coming together to make sure that the structural aspects of this work and give the right impetus for moving forward. The third bucket, I would say, would be academia and think tanks, and that really may not be in the org charts of decision making, but they actually inform where the direction needs to be and so forth, and a very important element. Then the industry captains. Of course, there's a lot of focus on startup communities, but you have large companies and medium, small companies that again have a critical role in playing. The industry captains have a critical role in playing to encourage the startup communities to come forth. And then, of course, the media and the communications piece to put all this in the right perspective and put it in a perspective of progress and so forth. That's a very important component. And finally, the end user. Of all the work we are doing, if the end user is satisfied with what the progress is being made in some of these initiatives, that's what will be the real litmus test in terms of addressing national security issues.
Thank you, Vivek.
Thank you.
Arun, over to you.
Yeah, so to bring in the perspective of the Indian private sector industry associated with defense, while we see a strong interconnect at the innovator level, at the academia level, at the startup community level, we do believe that there is scope for a broader private industry partnership between the defense industry in India and the defense industry in the US. The need for driving product realization and procurement processes where US products get co-developed and co-built with Indian companies, and Indian companies find access to the US defense market. I see some challenges here in terms of the regulatory framework and the enabling environment for company-to-company interactions. And like I said, while there's a lot happening at the startup space, Indian startups are opening up companies here in the US. They are able to operate, but Indian private industry does need a better framework for participation in the US defense market and vice versa. I think it's important that there is some link up to the procurement processes in both the countries. In terms of, like you talked about, the valley of death for the startups, we need to narrow that. We need to see that a lot of these innovations go to market, and we need to find mechanisms that will push them into market, make it sustainable, drive growth for these companies so that this becomes a self-sustaining process. I think the policymakers need to look at what can be done here to speed up this process. And overall, of course, like Vivek said, all the elements are in place. The government-to-government alignment is there. The bureaucracy is thinking together. The venture capitalists are looking at companies, startup ecosystem in both the countries. And of course, there is media attention as well. So I think the framework is in place. We need to really see how we can take this into greater commercial success.
Thank you, Arun. Joint Secretary Satija.
Distinguished friends from on the dais, colleagues from government from both the sides, and my friends from the private sector, academia. This is such a heartening thing to note that in the last 15, 16 months, we are having the third meeting here. That itself shows the kind of commitment we all have towards the common goal. That is strengthening two democracies, one the largest and one the oldest. So in terms of all the initiatives which have been taken in the last few months or few years, that those all have started showing results. And what we see is further deepening of ties between both the countries at all the levels. It's not just at the level of top where the governments are in touch or the big companies are in touch, but it's now it's reaching to the ground level in terms of student-to-student contact, in terms of smaller companies, medium and small enterprises contact with the bigger companies in US and in India, vice versa, or in terms of academia getting connected with the private sector on both the sides. So engagements are there. They have become quite strong in the last few months, few years. What we need to work on now is more speed towards in terms of getting the products to the ground, number one. Number two, how to have more and more common challenges and more number of challenges getting launched from both the sides so that we are pushing the innovators to come up with more and more solutions. So it's like totally the onus is on us. It's not only on the innovators. The more we push, the more output will come up. And once the innovations are coming to the fore, then again the onus is on all of us to make it materialize as fast as possible, so that what my friend informed about the valley of death, that that doesn't become a reality for the entrepreneurs. The role of each one of the participants is equally important. I won't say one is more important or another is less important, because funding is required, technology is required, and we must understand there is a technology gap between both the countries. Now that gap has to be bridged by all these initiatives so that we all progress together. And I would like to highlight the developments or the innovation what is happening, which can be also taken forward in terms of dual use. So the people of both the countries also flourish by all these innovations. So we all have common challenges, as it was highlighted in the previous session by Dr. Rice also. And those challenges, we should not be just thinking from a innovation which is straight-jacketed in a certain sector. How to use those innovations in uplifting the life of people. What I have observed that the tie-up at the top level is quite strong, and it's much more faster compared to the ground level. So that we all need to work upon, so that the technology which is getting developed sees the light of the day at a very fast pace. Thank you.
Thank you, Joint Secretary. Okay, we'll kick off with some questions. And again, this can be informal, so please jump in where you see an opportunity. So I had the privilege of being in the Defense Department with Des Diabo back in 2018 when we had the first ever 2+2 between the U.S. and India. It was certainly the first of its kind for India, full stop, and the first time the U.S. had ever had this 2+2. And I went over there with then Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis and Mike Pompeo and their counterparts, Minister Sitaraman and the Secretary Pompeo's counterpart. I remember one of the deliverables we were able to get to at that meeting was this memorandum of intent between Defense Innovation Unit and IDEX. And I remember Minister Sitaraman waving it over her head when she announced it. It was just a great moment. And I think there's a lot of opportunities to work with DIU and IDEX from the military perspective. I thought I'd ask General Rudd to maybe describe how, I think Indo-PACOM is kind of out front with its collaboration with the technology sector. And one area in particular they've established, which I think is unique to COCOMs right now, is this close relationship and partnership with the Defense Innovation Unit. I know we've got, who are DIU people in the audience here? Brian, you know what I'm talking about, and how it's great, and it's something I hope our other COCOM commanders, I know we have General Whiting here pretty soon, but maybe other COCOMs can benefit it. But General Rudd, talk to us about your collaboration with DIU and where you see that going. What are the opportunities you still want to leverage with the Defense Innovation Unit, and what can we learn from that experience?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. It really, I think the connectivity and the relationships with DIU and the COCOMs have been there, but it's really in the last couple of years that I've seen, at least from where I sit in my experience at Indo-PACOM, under Doug's leadership and how he really drove to transform DIU and focus it towards the pacing challenge, that of the PRC, in accordance with the prioritization of the national security strategy and national defense strategy, really tried to make sure that everything that DIU is doing was indexed against what we would call the hardest problem. And not that the other problems, and again, the challenges that I described that are ongoing, simultaneous, global, not that they don't matter, but really the theory is that if you solve the hardest problems, they benefit all. And part of the way that we've been able to really advance, and I like to use the term accelerate, and I don't think we are going fast enough, but I think we're going faster than we have in recent years. One of the ways we've done that is through the partnership with DIU. And in particular, we had 4 distinct efforts within technology that were designed and oriented towards delivering joint warfighting capability that would then be applicable to our allies and partners. And we needed to see those efforts go faster. And we needed to see them gain efficiency and linkages because they're all somewhat connected. But our approach at Indo-PACOM was somewhat siloed. And then through partnership with Doug and DIU and other elements of DoD and industry, but really it's the fact that Doug put his people embedded within our organization, specifically designed to close the gap between government and industry and look for those opportunities to accelerate these initiatives is just a prime example. And I call it the power of co-location, and the fact that he was willing to give, again, the human capital piece of this equation that's so important to it, that drives the innovation, but really drives the speed, is one way that that we're partnering with DIU. And again, it's been critical. And even as Doug was walking out today, we're discussing a meeting that he was in this morning and how we're constantly collaborating and communicating. But I think one of the key ways to do that is you put people together, embedded with each other's teams, and you close a gap, allow the connectivity to really thicken up. You gain a deeper understanding of what needs to be done, and then you can enhance and enable. And then ultimately, that's, I think, where we accelerate.
Thanks, General Rudd. And we'll get to hear from Doug Beck and Joint Secretary Satija at our fireside chat today. We can probably get more on that. Over to you, Dasdia. Well, I got to call her Lori. We've known each other a long time. INDUS, a lot of the heavy lifting and hard work has come out of your office, which is policy, Office of Secretary of Defense for Policy. And some might argue, given the content and the activities of INDUS, it may be better situated under our acquisition and sustainment or research and engineering. Lori, why is INDUS coming out of policy? Is this a policy initiative, or did it get mislocated, or why is it in policy?
It's a great question. And no, my team here who works hard on it every day does not think it's misplaced and they are not assigned to the wrong office. I think that sorry, it's a little hard for me to see you all. I think there are a couple of important things about situating this initiative in policy and in the high levels of the Secretary and the Minister's offices. And that first one is just the leadership, the guidance from the top that drives our systems to prioritize, to focus on the analysis of the problem, the strategic alignment we have. And from those things and the continued high-level touch points to resolve differences really creates, I think, a pretty virtuous cycle of engagement with technology, with innovators. So the thing we're looking for is both to send a demand signal. Partially we get that from Indo-Pacom. What is the operational demand? What's the problem we're trying to solve? We lift that up in our systems. We create networks both up and down and across the organizations and across our governments. And that's really work for policy offices. I think there's a lot of work that our acquisition and sustainment colleagues, a lot of parts of the department are involved in it. But I think the key to success for INDUS, or what I hope you will think is success so far, is really making things happen at speed. And a lot of that, I think, involves constant high-level attention from our governments.
Thank you, Lori. Vivek, first of all, congratulations on all the amazing work your company's done to date. You're on the cusp of this major sale to India, the MQ-9, which is it's just a really extraordinary event. You've worked with Indian startups and you've seen the challenges and opportunities. Can you give any advice on how to work better with startups from India and more effectively? We've got some Indian startups here today with us, so maybe they could benefit from your success, if you will.
Yeah, no, thank you. Our experience with the Startup India and the companies we've been working with has been absolutely phenomenal. The performance and the products that they bring to bear are truly world class. So we're partnered with 114 AI, which is an artificial intelligence company, as well as Third Eye Tech, which is a semiconductor company focused on optical sensors. And in both cases, we see great young talent that has, in a short amount of time, as John was explaining, where the timelines have really shrunk in this world, have created products that we're actually creating joint products with them for the global marketplace. I think what is key, and in most corporate boardrooms, are three things: predictability, accountability, and transparency. And that's very important for not just a startup, but the companies that are partnering with them. And so to be able to draw up a timeline and a business plan of how one will work together and hit those targets and make sure that we are on a path that actually solves a national security problem or issue is very critical. And I look forward to engaging with more startups and growing that ecosystem, because we have seen the nimbleness of the startup to actually tap into a global talent pool, speaking of human capital, and advisors from around the world to make their product or service really world-class, really helps in the partnership.
Thanks. Thank you, Vivek. For you Indian startups out there, predictability, accountability, and transparency. Take notes, okay, from someone who's succeeded. Arun, I'm going to look to you to describe maybe on a little higher, maybe to start, but maybe the more established defense company level. I know back, DTTI, the Defense Technology Trade Initiative, had lofty goals, but arguably has not realized some of its full potential. What are your thoughts on the more defense-to-defense cooperation at the more established defense company level? You've succeeded in your company, work with the United States. What can we learn from your experience, and how do you recommend we improve our cooperation at the larger defense company level?
So I think the opportunities are there, the environment is right. What we saw very recently for our company was something arising out of the Master Ship Repair Agreement, where the Pacific Fleet could actually use our shipyards to overhaul and to repair their ships, which are in that part of the region. So that's just an opportunity that was waiting to happen. It just didn't happen all these years, but it's such an obvious thing to do that you have your command out there in the Indo-Pacific, and they don't have to travel to any other place to get their ships fixed. What we are seeing is that there is far more that can be done. For example, from ship repair, you can move to shipbuilding. You can move to the higher end of technology in underwater technology. There's already a program going on underwater communication, which is part of the challenge. So how to put all of this together into a framework that can result in businesses for the companies, for company-to-company interaction, for us to become integrated into the supply chain, the reverse purchasing agreements that could probably be put in place that could make our, the US markets more accessible to the Indian companies, the joint development work which is being done for a global market. So there's all of these things which can be put in place, and I think the opportunities exist, the mindsets exist. Of course, defense is a complex thing. It's highly regulated. There are all these security issues, etc. But I think with the opening up of ties, we really need to see how we can under-regulate and overperform and overspeed. So I think the opportunity bag is there.
Fantastic. Joint Secretary Satija, as a Joint Secretary for Defense Industrial Promotions, it's a key position for all of us here in the INDUS. While you're in this role, what are your priorities? You only have a fleeting amount of time in the position. What are your priorities in your current role as Joint Secretary for Defense Industrial Promotion?
See, in terms of, if I just talk about in the context of INDUS or IDEX. So initial few years were to develop the kind of ecosystem we have in which everyone feels confident about approaching us, number one, and we have the necessary wherewithals, necessary connections at all the places so that it becomes a one-stop solutions for the startups, one-stop solutions for the academia, one-stop solutions for the technology partners, one-stop solutions for the venture capitalists. So we are at the center connecting all the various spokes. So that was the goal with which it was started, and I can fairly compliment and congratulate the entire IDEX team that they have been quite successful in this. And the number of challenges has gone beyond 450, and the number of companies which have benefited from it, the number of partners, incubator partners which have benefited from it is tremendous. So much so that even we are getting inquiries from different other sectors to help them replicating our model or to handhold them in working towards the common goal of this thing. Having said that, I would like to just urge everyone here, especially in US, that you have to move from thinking of transactional relationship to partnership relationship. The moment you use the word partner, so you have to move beyond the transaction. You have to take your partner along. So whatever hurdles the partner is facing, that you have to remove those hurdles, or at least try to reduce those hurdles to a certain extent so that it becomes much more easier for all the innovators to come and do business here or come and develop certain kind of new technologies here. Regulatory framework is one of the issues which has been highlighted by my counterpart. In addition to regulatory framework, we have already made some progress in terms of SOSA. Then we have various other things in the pipeline which we'll definitely try to resolve as early as possible. So as a Joint Secretary in Ministry of Defense, our priority is to enable and develop all those systems which enables a faster technological growth and faster development of products and technologies in the country.
Thanks. So those of us, as an aside, those of us who have been to Delhi wearing a suit and tie, we know that it gets pretty hot and uncomfortable in Delhi. Well, we usually brag about our weather here in California, but maybe this is a little bit of a Delhi experience for those of us in ties. So I'm going to call an audible
That's why they're not even phased.
as the chair, and if it's not too informal, why don't we just bump our chairs forward about a foot and get you a little bit out of the sun,
Makes
right?
sense.
All right. Okay. So another question.
No benefit.
Brilliant.
Why not? Because I can. Laura, you talked about the importance of speed, which coming from our Department of Defense, it's an interesting person to be talking about speed here, which is great. Speed is important. And I wonder, maybe we could ask collectively the panel how we can speed things up, both from a COCOM perspective, DoD, industry, maybe one or both of you can speak to that, and certainly our colleague from the MOD. How do we get faster, quicker, more agile in our respective organizations? And maybe I'll kick off with you, Laura, and then we can go to the COCOMs. Since you emphasize it
We
first.
take our guidance from OSD.
Thank you. I think it's obvious in India are incredibly large bureaucracies. Large bureaucracies are not innately fast or smooth or easy to engage with. And so I think transparency is an important one. I think having the sense of, as we have gone around, we've asked companies, investors, what's preventing this type of cooperation? And what we hear increasingly is we don't know where to start, we don't know who to call, we don't understand the regulations, and those are very fair points. So I think you made the comment about my staffing. Not every company is the same size and has as much staff dedicated to understanding the ins and outs of Washington or regulations. And so I think the first thing is transparency and providing that in education formats, information sharing, making more of it available to all the people involved in this Defense Innovation Bridge is the first step. And the second, I think, is that we continue to leverage commercially available options, commercially available solutions to the most challenging problems. We continue to look to the warfighter to say, what are those most pressing problems? But the more we can lift up those two, I think, and then basically try to bridge them, try to smush the time and space between them. And then continuing to ask ourselves, is this it? Are we doing it right? What's next? What more is needed? Is an important element so that we as your governments can try to innovate as well and can try to move at a speed that's relevant.
Thank you. I'm going to brag about my friend, General Rudd, just a little bit to tee him up for this, but he's not wearing his uniform. If he was, there might be some indicators that he has served in our most elite special operations units that are just famous for something that General McChrystal created back when he was our commanding of our special operations units in Iraq and Afghanistan. Just speed it was all about speed. So now you're in a big COCOM. Hopefully it's going to stay in this COCOM, pending confirmation as the deputy. How do you get that same speed you experienced as a special operator now that you're commanding or helping command an enormous organization like Indo-Pacific?
That's a great question. I think, aside from background and what may be a hallmark of special operations, which again, certainly it's speed. I think writ large, you got to ask yourselves, what are those things that slow us down?
Interesting.
Lori's alluded to some of that. Some of it's organizational, some of it's bureaucracy. But I think a lot of it is not malicious. I think a lot of it is centered around risk. I mean, a lot of the reasons and the mechanisms that are in place to force a deliberate process and approach is all tied to risk. So I think first, one, we've got to understand what is the risk and what are those key pieces that we're trying to mitigate, manage, and understand. And then two, how do we accept them? How do we buy it down, accept it, that then allows the innovative, fast approach to take hold and actually deliver. So I'd say that's the first piece. From an organizational standpoint, leadership, attention, focus, you mentioned those. The discipline as a nation and as partners in this case that rally around the common challenge. And so, for us at Indo-Pacific Command, we have many. I mean, we have 4 of the big 5 within our national defense strategy, but there's one that outweighs all of them and has the majority of our attention. And again, if we get it right against China, then the collective, it can apply broadly. So the discipline, and in this sense, the strategic discipline to stay focused on the most important challenge. Again, not that we can ignore the others, and that's the reality of the complexity of the world in which we live in, but an element of strategic discipline that keeps us focused and anchored on that hardest problem, coupled with risk understanding and acceptance. Again, not aversion and not irresponsibleness. I think those are 2 ways that can allow us to drive better and go faster. But again, I think the partnership piece to this is certainly a force multiplier and an accelerator. The fact that we will collaborate, and we do collaborate, again, Dr. Rice mentioned on the military side, the joint interoperability, the exercises that we execute, and that extends. It extends throughout our defense departments, throughout our industrial base. It's really a whole of society approach and understanding and focus. So part of this, to answer the question, Joe, is a lot of this is about how we communicate and focus our nations and frankly the world around this common problem, these challenges of which we have to get right. And we have the opportunity because again, we have the talent, we have the technology, we just have to bring it together in all the right places and at the scale to enable those effects.
Thank you, General Rudd. Maybe putting a slightly finer point to it from industry. Let's talk about speed in the context of the partnership, of collaboration, and how we dial that up from your perspective in the private sector, Vivek and Arun, whoever may want to speak to it.
No, that's a great question, Joe. I think speed obviously can be increased if you have more partnerships and collaboration and you are doing it in a methodical way. For example, in R&D, every company is spending R&D efforts in whatever field they are. However, if you synergize R&D efforts and bringing a product to market quicker by doing so, working either bilaterally or in a quad framework or in another context, the AUKUS framework, how are you bringing all the elements together in partnership and doing it in a way so you can achieve the end goal is one aspect on speed. The other aspect on speed, of course, is funding, and I know there's several folks here from the VC community and others. It is very important to know when to fund and how much to fund to get to certain results, because I've seen often that you start with some amount of funding and you think it's going to carry the day, but the startups start drying up and so they slow down, and that's one of the reasons why you don't meet the schedules. And so that's the other important aspect here.
Thanks, Vivek. Arun, anything to add to that?
I think there is certainly need to speed up things, and what I see as a positive is the innovation framework is moving fast. You have these competitions, you have the challenges, you have people responding to it, and if we can take them to fruition quickly, support it, and see if some of the innovative work is inducted in service. Probably that would be a big enabler, and it would get the flywheel spinning. If I would be a bit provocative, I would say that on a commercial scale, there is really need to speed up things, and most of the procurement which is happening today is, India procures from the US on mostly FMS kind of arrangements. And I would say that we need to move the government into the back room and bring industry into the front room and, do away with the FMS and stuff like that. Let there be industry to industry interactions. Let's co-develop and bring in products. Lindsay spoke about the land systems getting in some of the products into India. But the Indian landscape is so different, the requirements are different, that if our companies work together and develop products for the Indian needs together, probably it would be better than trying to adapt the product from here into the Indian ecosystem. So I think if we think differently, if we cut down on regulations, we might end up doing things a lot faster.
Thank you. So government, I love this quote. I'm going to read it back for everyone. Get government to the back room and industry to the front room. So maybe that's something we can all try to do. But the truth is we can't get government out of the room for when you're dealing with defense. So it's how to work with the systems we have and increase that speed. Maybe both come to the front room if I could say that, but very well put. Joint Secretary, I know this is like Des Diable, working in a large organization. I spent time at South Block and noticed the similarities, and people want to be fast, but it's just hard in an organization like yours. But what are your thoughts on speed and within the MOD?
I'll speak from 2-3 perspectives in this. One is starting from the startups. The kind of problem statements they receive from the forces or from the government or from the big companies, that needs to be much more specific, and that needs to be very, very clearly defined. If that is not very, very clearly defined, that will lead to definitely delays in the development. So that's starting from the product development side, the speed how we can increase the speed. Clear product, clear problem statement, which doesn't get changed over a period of time with the changing scenario. Like for example, tomorrow yesterday you had a Ukraine war, and then you suddenly thought, no, what I'm developing is not correct. So suddenly you change the yardsticks and the parameters. So the person who is developing, he cannot survive with that. Number one. Number two, coming from again thinking from the startup's point of view, there's a great amount of information in dissymmetry, or asymmetry, I'll say. So starting from the level of how to move about, how to navigate the various procedures, and how to convert the product development into a commercially successful product and move to the kind of procurement business which you get from the companies or from the government. So that information asymmetry can be helped or can be fastened through common facility centers. IDEX, what we do is a kind of common facility center where we are facilitating all these transactions. Similarly, we can have common facility center in terms of tests. We can have common facility centers in terms of R&D. So that will also increase the speed and reduce the cost. Third, coming to the procurement cycle, that is quite longish what you are saying, and I think in both the countries or different countries, because of the kind of complexities which the entire defense procurement involves, that every government is quite well aware of, and it is trying to reduce the process and fasten it as much as possible. So we all are working towards it, and the only thing is, if the intent is clear, I think we'll definitely move forward in this.
Thank you, Joint Secretary. So, question, what do you call a failed startup founder in Silicon Valley? Experienced, okay? There's a saying, fail fast. We like to call it learn fast, but there's a culture among startups that's you iterate, you learn, you fail, you iterate, you get better. But in the government, in the Defense Department, the stakes are pretty high if you fail in some respects. I mean, literally you can't fail. So General Rudd, you talked about your understanding of risk in your comments. Let me throw this at you. Why don't you and Vivek switch places and talk about how you should look at risk within your organizations? Vivek, representing a lean, agile, nimble company that's iterating, moving fast. You being having the responsibility, given how high the stakes are, that you've got to really mitigate that risk, but you still want to capture the benefits of a more agile organization. So maybe your thoughts on how you can address risk differently in your organizations. I say switch places because it might be fun, but you can...
You want us like physically?
Sure. Vivek, General Vivek Law. You've got an immense responsibility. It's more than to your stockholders and your bottom line. It's life and death. The stakes are really high as a combatant commander or a deputy combatant commander. What, from your experience as a very successful industry person, startup person, do you think a COCOM like General Rudd could learn from? Any advice from your experience in a very fast-moving, agile organization you think could translate to a large, more cumbersome organization?
Right. Wow. Okay.
Easy question, I know,
Easy
right?
question.
I've known Vivek for a while, so I can do this.
I think fundamentally, it again, regardless of which organization, government or private, it comes down to some basic tenets, I think, of how do you categorize risk, whether it's operational risk, whether it is contractual risk, whether it is the risk in partnering abroad, maintaining your supply chain resilience by partnering with the right folks and so forth. So there are many categories of risk, but however, the one common theme I would say in terms of managing risk is if you're not running fast enough, you are actually standing still. Wow. In this environment. And so because the global community is moving so fast in some of these technology areas that we're talking about, you really have to be at your top speed just to even maintain where you are. And that culture and mindset has to percolate at all levels. But certainly, as we saw in INDUS, as well as I said, the reason they're so successful is because there's always the top level visibility and push to make sure that there are milestones and review processes in place. And I think that exists for any organization, so that'd be my
Thank you, Vivek.
2 cents.
For those of you on the social media side, another quotable quote from Vivek, if you're not running fast enough, you're standing still. Classic. So General Rudd, just one day you show up to your office with a hoodie on, some tennis shoes, you're like, hey, we're going to revisit how we look at risk based on my experience as a startup founder. What might you do to revisit how you look at risk in your large organization, given the stakes, but given the need to move at speed?
Yeah, again, I think first and foremost, there's got to be a common objective. There's got to be clarity on the challenge and what we're trying to collectively do. And so, to go back to the reference to General McChrystal and Special Operations in that community, one of the things that he insisted on and really mastered was that information dominance and information sharing. And again, this ties right into these aspects that we've highlighted and many others, the trust factor. So if you trust that you're all oriented on the common goal, granted, you'll have different ways that you think we should get there, and you're anchored on that, you're transparent and moving information as fast and as flat, and then people are empowered. I think part of what can be gleaned from both industry, small startups, fast, lean, and then in the military side of the house, on the special ops side, since you opened that can up, Joe, empowered individuals who are given just general left and right guidance and say, solve this problem and do it fast, and it's okay. And you can put the guardrails in, back to the risk factor, because that was part of your question is, how do you mitigate that risk? And of course, risk to force, risk to mission, risk to strategy or escalation. Sometimes we obviously, in the military, fundamentally come back to the individuals that you're putting into harm's way. And that's probably a nice little, as a side note, segue into the whole aspect of leveraging machines, leveraging technology for warfighting applications, I think some principles apply to this. Number one, there's no reason we should put a human in harm's way if a machine can do it faster and do it cheaper. That's number one. Number two, there's certainly, and this crowd knows it far better than I do, opportunities to exploit what machines can do faster, quicker, and better, but with human oversight. So there's got to be that integration and interaction. But then ultimately, this is the ultimate risk factor, is when you're making decisions about human lives and the application of lethal effects, there's absolutely got to be human oversight to that. I mean, that's a moral imperative. So I think, again, once we get to that point where we have empowered and entrusted each other, oriented around the common problem and objective, we can go fast.
Thanks. So we're going to have time for one quick response to one question. This is one I coordinated with General Rudd, but I think would love to hear everyone's perspective. In this case, General Rudd, where does Indo-PACOM see opportunity for the greatest gain in the Defense Innovation Partnership? And then I'd like a DoD, industry, and MOD perspective, and then we'll wrap it up. But over to you, General Rudd.
Yeah, I'll build out a little bit what I just touched on, but with a little more specificity. We are relentlessly pursuing decision superiority at the operational level, and that extends into the tactical level. So if we can, and we crudely simplify it sometimes, we say we need to be able to blind, see, and kill the enemy in terms of joint and combined warfighting. Blind, can we deliver capabilities and effects that disable the adversary's ability to see, sense, and understand what we're doing, and therefore preserve our force, deliver the ability to outmaneuver it in contested spaces? Can we see collectively at speed, at scale, and in all domains? And I know we've got General Whiting coming in. Increasingly, the space domain is absolutely critical to this, and that's why we're really excited about the initiatives that relate to space and space awareness together. Very critical. And then ultimately, based on being able to see and sense from the seabed to the stars in all domains where the threats are and where we gain decision-making superiority to move fast, to deliver effects or not, that's the kill piece. And that doesn't necessarily always mean lethal. It just means delivering an effect or a maneuver or making a decision that preserves your force.
Thanks. Lori, opportunities are the greatest gain in the Defense Innovation Partnership.
I think we have to look for something that's enduring. I think we have to build on people-to-people ties. And so, in fact, my idea was also to have government a little less in the front, but to look for what companies, what investors, what the researchers actually think is new and next, so that we are moving at that speed and the government is not setting the tone and the limits of what's possible and what can be fast. And I think that transparency, trust, and all the themes that we've talked about are the important ways to make INDUS X the type of bridge that endures, and that we can continue asking ourselves the question of, is this it? How do we keep improving together?
Thank you. In fact, we've picked on you a lot. I might just jump to Arun for the industry perspective. Arun, over to you on those big opportunities to improve on Defense Innovation Partnership.
So I think just easing of regulations would help, and pushing this innovation connect at a faster pace. I think these are the things that are critical for taking this forward.
Okay. Joint Secretary Satija, final words from MOD perspective.
See, listening to the stakeholders and then acting towards it. Just listening will not work. So we have to listen to all the stakeholders and then act toward facilitating what all is the requirements, starting from the entrepreneurs, then the governments. Like we both need to understand the the previous topic was risk you were talking about. The government is the biggest risk taker. It's like, for you or for a company, it's like financial loss. For us, it's the matter of national security and the people's life is in the question. So we have to balance both. So by listening to each other, then we can mitigate those risks by more information, and we can understand each other's perspective more. So I'll urge for more communication and more easing out of the environment in which everyone is operating.
Thank you. We have a saying that one team, one fight, and this is we have to be a team here, and thank you all for all you've done to help build this important partnership, and thank you for joining us on our panel. And we can take a break now, some coffee. Let's give our panelists a hand.